What if during the chaos, pressure, and fear of the Chunin exam, one night, quiet moment changed Naruto and Hinata life forever? Before Naruto proved himself, before Hinata found her courage, before the village decided who they were meant to become, a secret is born. One mistake, one night, one consequence. Neither of them were ready for. Now Hinata must face a truth she never planned for, and Naruto must grow faster than destiny ever ended. This is not a cute love story. This is what if about responsibility, fear, judgment, and love under pressure. And this is only the beginning. So hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we will see what if Naruto got Hinata pregnant during the Chunin exam. So let's start the story.
Sleep never stayed long with Sasuke anymore. He lay rigid beneath the thin sheet, staring into darkness while the steady rise and fall beside him anchored the room in quiet. Sakura slept on her side, one arm tucked beneath her pillow, breath even and untroubled. Moonlight traced the curve of her cheek and the faint crease between her brows that never quite disappeared, even at rest. Sasuke watched it like a fault line, proof of every strain he'd helped carve into their lives. He shifted carefully, easing his arm free so he wouldn't wake her. His fingers hovered, then brushed her hair back from her face. The contact burned. It always did. He drew his hand away as if from a flame. This shouldn't feel like a battlefield, he thought, jaw tightening. And yet every night did. He rolled onto his side, turning his back to her, eyes fixed on the wall as if it could answer him. Sakura murmured softly in her sleep, a sound that twisted something sharp in his chest. His gaze dropped, unwilling, inevitable, to the gentle swell beneath the blanket. Life, fragile, heavy. The past didn't stay buried. It never had. Long before Konoha rebuilt itself from war and ash, before names like hero and criminal clung to him like twin shadows, Sasuke Uchiha had been a child who hated messes. He remembered the kitchen floor, polished wood, warm with sunlight, and the weight of expectation pressing down on his small shoulders. Makoto knelt before him, calm as ever, placing something red and round into his hands. It was cool, smooth, perfect. "Hold it steady," she'd said, voice gentle but firm. He had frowned, nose wrinkling. "Why?" She smiled, the kind that meant she already knew the answer. When he squeezed, the skin split. Juice spilled between his fingers, splattering the floor. The silence afterward had been worse than a scolding. His mother hadn't raised her voice. She only looked at the mess, then back at him. What's done doesn't return to how it was. He hadn't understood then, not really. He only understood the chore that followed, the weight of the mop, the dull ache in his arms as he scrubbed away something he couldn't fix. Years later, the lesson still followed him. Actions lingered. Consequences didn't fade. Sakura woke before dawn, frustration already coiled tight in her chest. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths that refused to slow her thoughts. Missions, reports, training schedules, all the pieces of a life that never seemed to line up at the right time. Sasuke had been gone more than he'd been home these past months, and when he was here, there was a carefulness between them that made her heart ache. She turned onto her side and hugged the pillow, eyes stinging. "I'm running out of time," she thought. The idea terrified her more than any battlefield ever had. As a medic, she understood biology better than most. As a woman, understanding didn't make waiting easier. She pressed her lips together, then sat up abruptly, resolve sparking through the anxiety. There were options. There were always options if you were brave enough to ask. Her phone felt heavier than usual in her hand. "When are you coming back?" she typed. The reply came quicker than she expected. "Tonight." Her pulse jumped. "We need to talk." A pause. Then, "Okay." Sakura exhaled slowly, steadying herself. This wasn't a weakness. Wanting a future wasn't something to be ashamed of. She scrolled through her contacts and stopped at a familiar name. The call connected after a single ring. Tsunade-sama, a beat of silence, then a low hum of acknowledgement. "What's wrong, Sakura?" "Nothing," she said quickly, then corrected herself. "Everything. I need your advice." There was a scrape of a chair on the other end, the sound of someone settling in for a conversation that wouldn't be simple. "Come to my office," Tsunade said at last. "Now." The line went dead. Sakura stared at her phone, heart pounding, not with fear, but with the sense that she'd just stepped onto a path she couldn't turn back from. That evening, Sasuke stood at the gates of Konoha, watching the sun sink behind the Hokage monument. The village was peaceful. Laughing children ran past him. Families walked together beneath lantern light. He didn't move. Something was waiting for him inside those walls. He could feel it, the same way he'd always felt the pull of fate tightening, reminding him that some choices once made demanded their due. And this time, there would be no running from the answer. The knock came soft but firm. "Come in," Tsunade said without looking up. Sakura stepped into the office, the familiar scent of antiseptic and old paper grounding her nerves. She offered a polite smile, hands clasped together as Tsunade gestured toward the chair across from her desk. The Hokage's office felt heavier than usual, less like a place of authority and more like a crossroads. Tsunade closed her laptop and leaned back. "All right," she said plainly. "Tell me what's been eating at you." Sakura hesitated, fingers tightening in her lap. She was a medic. She spoke about bodies and outcomes every day. But this was personal. "Sasuke and I want to have another child," she said finally. "We've been trying for months, and nothing's happened. I don't know if it's stress, timing, my age, or if something's wrong with either of us." Tsunade's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened with focus. She pulled a notepad toward her and began jotting things down. "We'll run tests, both of you. No assumptions until we see the numbers." Sakura nodded, relief loosening her shoulders. "If timing is the issue," Tsunade continued, "we'll compensate for that. If biology is the issue, we'll work around it." She paused, then added dryly, "Even legends aren't exempt from reality." Sakura flushed despite herself. Tsunade stood and opened a drawer, retrieving a sealed container and setting it on the desk between them. "This stays clinical," she said. "You bring what's needed. I'll handle the rest." Sakura stared at the container, then nodded again, more firmly this time. Hope, fragile but insistent, settled in her chest. Evening in the Uchiha household was louder than Sasuke remembered it being in his childhood. The door slid open, and before he could fully step inside, Sarada was already there, grinning up at him. "You're back." He allowed himself a small smile and tapped her forehead lightly. "I said I would be." From the kitchen came the clatter of cookware and the faint smell of something burning. Sakura appeared, flustered and bright-eyed. "Sasuke, you're home, wait." She spun back toward the stove, muttering under her breath as she tried to salvage dinner. He watched her for a moment longer than necessary. She looked tired, determined, alive. Later, after the dishes were cleared and Sarada retreated to her room, Sakura led him upstairs. Her steps slowed near the bedroom door, uncertainty creeping into her movements. Inside, she sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, waiting for him to join her. "You remember what we talked about," she said quietly. "About another child." Sasuke nodded. "I went to see Tsunade," she continued, words tumbling faster now. "There are options, ways to make this work even with our schedules, even with everything." She hesitated, then looked up at him. But I won't do anything unless you're sure. Silence stretched between them. Sasuke turned away, gaze drifting to the window. The village lights glimmered beyond the glass, proof of a life that kept moving forward whether he followed or not. He thought of Sarada growing up without him there for most of it, of regrets that never quite faded. I don't want to miss it again, he said finally. Sakura's breath caught. I want to be here, he added, voice low. If we do this, I'm not running. The relief on her face was immediate and overwhelming. She smiled, then laughed softly, blinking away tears as she reached for him. Then we'll try, she said. She handed him the small container, suddenly shy. Sasuke looked at it, then back at her, the weight of the future pressing into his palm. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low, ominous. Neither of them noticed the storm clouds gathering over Konoha, nor the unseen consequence already set in motion by a choice made with the best of intentions. The Uzumaki home settled into its usual evening rhythm, soft lights, muted laughter fading into the walls, the kind of peace Naruto never took for granted. Hinata stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, listening to the steady splash of water against porcelain. The day had been long but ordinary, and she welcomed that. Ordinary meant safe. Ordinary meant everyone was home. Warmth pressed in behind her. She inhaled sharply as arms circled her waist, familiar and unmissable. Naruto's presence was a constant, loud when he meant to be, gentle when he remembered to be. His chin brushed her shoulder. His breath stirred the fine hairs at her neck. And Naruto, she murmured, half warning, half plea. His voice was lazy, content. The kids are still up, she whispered, eyes flicking toward the living room. A quiet laugh rumbled against her back. Relax, I'm just standing here. She turned just enough to swat his arm, cheeks burning. He grinned anyway, unrepentant, and she caught the glint in his eyes that meant he'd missed her more than he wanted to admit. Her composure slipped when he brushed a kiss against her temple. Brief, innocent, but enough to make her heart stutter. She pushed him away with more force than necessary. Oof! He stumbled, clutching his side dramatically. Hinata groaned. You're impossible. Hey! He protested, pouting. I was being nice. She dragged him toward the bedroom before he could say anything worse, shutting the door with a soft click. The house grew quieter. Distant cartoon sounds, the hum of appliances. Naruto sat on the bed, rubbing his ribs. You really pack a punch, you know? Hinata folded her arms, trying, and failing, not to smile. You brought it on yourself. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, just full. Naruto looked at her, really looked, and his expression softened. Come here, he said, reaching for her hand. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. No bravado now, no teasing, just warmth and the comfort of being chosen every day. The door creaked open. Mom? Dad? Hinata startled, leaping to her feet. Himawari. She smoothed her hair, heart racing, and knelt to her daughter's level. What is it, sweetie? You said you'd tuck me in, Himawari mumbled, eyes heavy with sleep. Of course, Hinata said quickly, kissing her forehead. Go on ahead. I'll be right there. Himawari nodded and padded back down the hall. Hinata exhaled and turned back to the bed. Naruto had already collapsed onto his back, arms flung wide, breathing slow and deep, out cold. She shook her head fondly. Typical. She turned off the light and paused in the hallway, eyes catching on the calendar pinned near the kitchen. An appointment circled in careful ink. A reminder she hadn't told Naruto about yet. Soon, she thought. Soon I'll have to say it out loud. She tucked Himawari in, brushing her hair back until sleep claimed her again. As Hinata closed the door, a strange unease settled in her chest, soft, insistent. Across the village, plans were being made. Decisions set into motion, and like ripples in still water, their consequences were already spreading, quietly, inexorably, toward every household that believed peace was permanent. On the 10th of October, long before the world felt as loud and complicated as it did now, Hinata Hyuga stood alone beneath the lantern-lit trees of the Hyuga compound. She was young, small hands cupped carefully around a single firefly, its light pulsing like a fragile heartbeat. The night air was cool against her cheeks, and her breath trembled with a wish she was too embarrassed to ever say out loud. Not for power, not for strength, not even for courage. She wished quietly, fiercely to be seen, to grow into herself, to be noticed by the boy who always ran ahead without looking back. She released the firefly and watched it drift upward, its glow vanishing into the dark. Some wishes took time, she would later learn, and some came true only when you were brave enough to face what followed. Years later, Hinata sat on the edge of Naruto's bed, fingers clenched in the fabric of her sleeves. Her heart felt like it might burst straight through her ribs. Naruto stood a few steps away, uncharacteristically still, blue eyes filled not with impatience but concern. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything neither quite knew how to say. I'm not sure I'm ready, Hinata admitted, voice barely above a whisper. She turned away, face burning, shoulders drawn inward as if she could disappear into herself. Naruto didn't laugh, didn't tease. He moved closer, slow and careful, and gently took her hands, easing them away from her face. "Hey," he said softly, "that's okay. We don't have to rush anything. Ever." She looked up at him then, really looked, and found only warmth. No pressure, no expectation. Relief flooded her so suddenly it made her dizzy. A small, shy smile curved her lips. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." He scratched the back of his head, grin sheepish but sincere. "I just want you to feel safe. With me." And in that moment, Hinata knew something deep and unshakable. Naruto Uzumaki would never push her past her limits. He would wait. He always would. That night, as she walked home beneath the quiet stars, she made one last wish. Not whispered to fireflies this time, but carved into her heart. That when the time came, she would know. Morning arrived too quickly. Sunlight spilled through the curtains of the Uchiha bedroom, landing squarely across Sakura's face. She groaned softly and rolled onto her side, squinting at the alarm clock. Too early. She turned away from the light and found herself looking at Sasuke. He slept peacefully, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. No tension in his jaw, no shadows flickering behind closed eyes. Just calm, real earned calm. Sakura smiled without meaning to. There had been a time when sleep never came easily to him, when even rest felt like a battlefield. She remembered those nights. His brow drawn tight, breath uneven, body coiled as if expecting to wake to danger. But those days were behind them. She glanced at the clock again. 6:15 a.m. With a quiet sigh, Sakura sat up and rubbed her face. As she moved, Sasuke stirred, blinking awake and turning his head toward her. She offered him a tired but genuine smile. "Good morning." He yawned, eyes soft as they focused on her. Outside, Konoha began another ordinary day. Inside these homes, quiet, loving, fragile, paths were aligning. Old wishes, new choices, and unspoken consequences were drawing closer together. and none of them yet realized how deeply their lives were about to intertwine. Sasuke was still half asleep when Sakura slipped from the bed. She moved quietly, careful not to wake him, pulling the covers back and stretching as she crossed the room. The bathroom light flicked on, muted by the early hour. She tied her hair back out of habit, splashed water on her face, and stared at her reflection while her thoughts drifted, briefly, dangerously, back to the night before. Focus, she told herself. The shower steamed quickly, heat loosening muscles that still carried the echo of tension and closeness. By the time she stepped out, towel wrapped tight around her, the fogged mirror reflected only a blur. She wiped it clear and exhaled sharply. Marks, faint but unmistakable, lined her neck. Sakura pressed her fingers to them, wincing. "Of course," she muttered. Clothing choice adjusted, problem solved. A high collar would have to do. The clock on the wall glowed faintly. 6:44 a.m. Her eyes widened. Sarada. She pulled on her robe and passed Sasuke in the hallway as he headed toward the bathroom, still blinking himself awake. Their eyes met briefly, comfortable, familiar, before she turned down the hall. Sarada's door creaked open to reveal her daughter curled around a massive panda plush, breathing slow and deep. Sakura's expression softened for half a second before duty took over. "Sarada," she said, shaking her gently. "Time to get up." A muffled groan. No movement. Sakura straightened, arms crossing. "Sarada." Nothing. Her eyebrow twitched. "Sarada Uchiha." The blankets were yanked away. Sarada bolted upright with a sharp gasp, Sharingan flashing instinctively before fading as awareness returned. "Mama, I'm awake," she protested, collapsing back onto the pillow. "You have 20 minutes, Sakura said evenly. "Mission prep. Don't test me." "Yes, Mama," Sarada mumbled, already half asleep again but wise enough not to push her luck. By 7:18, the house had shifted into its morning rhythm. Sakura stood by the dresser, labeling forms with practiced precision when a thought struck her hard enough to make her freeze. The sample. She cursed under her breath, turned, and found Sasuke stepping out of the bathroom. Before he could ask, she caught his arm. "I almost forgot," she said quickly, holding up the sealed container. "Tsunade needs it today. Just break the seal and handle it before we leave." Sasuke stared at the container for a long moment. "Okay." He took it without another word and disappeared back into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. Inside, the space felt suddenly too quiet. Sasuke set the container down and rested his hand against the counter, exhaling slowly. Missions were simpler than this. There were clear objectives, clear risks. This was awkward, personal, unavoidable. Necessary, he reminded himself. He focused on the task clinically, deliberately, shutting out everything else. When he was finished, he sealed the container, washed his hands, and leaned briefly against the sink, breathing steady. The man in the mirror looked unchanged, but something about the weight of what he now held said otherwise. He stepped out moments later, container in hand, expression unreadable. Sakura took it gently, careful, professional. Yet her eyes softened when she met his. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. Neither of them spoke, the thought hanging between them. This wasn't just a test. It was a step forward. And once taken, there would be no undoing it. 7:41 a.m. The cap clicked shut with a final twist. Sasuke washed his hands, movements precise, methodical, as if treating the task like a mission debrief rather than something deeply personal. He changed quickly, pulling on his usual dark clothes, and slipped the small container into his pocket before heading downstairs. Sarada was already by the door, crouched as she tightened her shoes, hair still slightly tousled from sleep. "I'll see you later, Papa," she said brightly. "Bye, Mama," she called toward the kitchen. "Be careful on your mission," Sakura replied, voice warm but distracted. Sasuke gave a brief nod. "See you." As the door closed behind Sarada, the house fell into a quieter rhythm. Sasuke walked into the kitchen, reached into his pocket, and wordlessly placed the container into Sakura's hand, who was mid-bite, spoon halfway to her mouth. She froze. "Sasuke," she said flatly, staring at the cup. "I was eating." He lifted a shoulder in a half-shrug, already turning away. "You said it was urgent." She sighed, set the cup down with care, and stood to rinse her bowl. A glance at the clock made her stiffen. "I'm late." She grabbed the container again, securing it in her bag. "I'll take it straight to Shizune." Sakura leaned in to kiss him goodbye. Sasuke stepped aside smoothly, already heading toward the bedroom. "I'll see you later." He didn't look back, but the faint smirk over his shoulder told her he knew exactly what he was doing. Sakura stood there for half a second, disappointed but unsurprised. Again, she shook her head, slipped on her shoes, and hurried out the door, determination overriding everything else. The hospital was already alive when she arrived. "Sakura!" She nearly skidded to a stop when she spotted Shizune near the nurse's station. "Here." Sakura handed over the container, breathing a little hard. "That's Sasuke's sample. I'm scheduled for my egg count tomorrow." Shizune checked the label, then frowned slightly. "You forgot the time. About 7:45. That works." Shizune nodded, resting a reassuring hand on Sakura's shoulder. "Get some water. I'll take this to the lab." Sakura exhaled slowly, tension draining from her shoulders as she watched Shizune walk away. Sample secured. She didn't even realize her hand had drifted to her stomach until she caught herself absently tracing a small circle there. She stopped. "Don't get ahead of yourself," she thought, though a quiet smile lingered anyway. Across the village, Hinata stood in her kitchen, book forgotten on the counter as she surveyed the refrigerator's contents. "We're out of carrots and milk," she murmured to herself. She closed the door and immediately noticed the neatly packed lunch sitting untouched. "Naruto." "Oh no!" Hinata smiled ruefully. She grabbed the box. "I'll drop this off." "Himawari-chan," she called gently. "We're going grocery shopping." "I'm coming," Himawari chirped, soon appearing in her sweater, shoes slightly mismatched but enthusiasm intact. Hinata laughed softly and took her hand. "Let's go." Sasuke sat alone in the quiet house, one arm draped over the back of the couch, staring at the ceiling. No missions, no reports, too much time to think. He stood abruptly. The Uchiha training grounds called to him the way they always had. Empty space, silence, echoes of discipline and ghosts. It was an easy walk from the hospital district, familiar enough that his feet carried him without thought. Halfway there, the memory struck him without warning. Not his own, Itachi. The image unfolded like a fragment torn from another life. Stone paths, the scent of dust and leaves, Fugaku walking beside his eldest son toward the old training fields. Tension in his father's shoulders. Watchful eyes in the shadows. "What's wrong?" young Itachi had asked. Fugaku had paused, just for a fraction of a second, before his expression hardened into something unreadable. "Nothing," he said. "Let's go." Sasuke stopped walking. The echo of that word lingered far too long. Nothing. He clenched his jaw and continued forward, unaware that the past he thought he'd buried was already stirring again. Pulled to the surface by choices being made in the present, choices that would soon demand their own consequences. Sasuke stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. Morning light washed over the neighborhood, rows of homes rebuilt after war, laughter echoing faintly from somewhere down the street. It was still strange to see the Uchiha name rooted again near the heart of the village rather than isolated at its edge. He paused, eyes drifting over the rooftops. Would there ever be another compound? A place bearing the weight of that name? The thought brought no anger, not quite grief either. Just a dull tug beneath his ribs, something unfinished. He exhaled slowly and let the feeling fade as it always did. Sarada knew nothing of what had been lost, and maybe that was mercy. As he began walking toward the training grounds, another thought followed him. Unwelcome, persistent. Another Uchiha. The idea felt heavier than he expected. Hinata followed a few steps behind Himawari, who practically bounced down the street, energy spilling from her with every movement. She's so bright, Hinata thought fondly. Himawari was everything Hinata hadn't been at that age. Confident, curious, unafraid to take up space. And yet, when she smiled at strangers, there was unmistakable kindness there. That part, at least, felt familiar. Mom, look! Himawari tugged her hand excitedly. Taiyaki! Before Hinata could caution her to slow down, Himawari darted ahead. Himawari, wait! Too late. Hinata collided solidly with someone, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Pain flared across the bridge of her nose as she stumbled back, hands flying up instinctively. I am so sorry, she began, bowing hurriedly. Dark eyes met hers from beneath a curtain of black hair. Cool. Assessing. Uchiha Sasuke. Her words tangled immediately. You Uchiha-san. Himawari ran ahead and I wasn't watching. It's fine, he said curtly. He stepped past her without another word, already moving on. Hinata remained frozen for a second, then spun around in alarm. Himawari. Her daughter was at the stall, grinning ear to ear, taiyaki in hand. Mama, the man gave it to me for free. Hinata's heart sank, then steadied. She knelt, taking Himawari's small hand gently. That was kind of him, she said softly. But kindness doesn't mean we take advantage. They returned together. Hinata bowed deeply to the vendor and paid, thanking him sincerely. Only then did she straighten, pride settling quietly in her chest. Together, they continued toward the Hokage Tower. 2 days later, Sakura was called into Tsunade's office. She didn't sit. So, Sakura asked, fingers laced together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Tsunade flipped through a stack of papers, then looked up with a rare smile. Everything checks out. Sakura blinked. Everything. Counts are within normal range. Nothing alarming. Tsunade tapped the folder. Which means we move forward. Relief washed over Sakura so strongly her knees nearly buckled. We'll proceed with the intrauterine insemination, Tsunade continued. I'll handle it personally. If that doesn't take, we adjust the plan. But for now, this is promising. Sakura nodded again and again, unable to stop smiling. 9 a.m., 2 days from now, Tsunade added. And Sakura? Yes. Tsunade's gaze softened. Try not to carry the weight of the outcome alone. This isn't something you control. Sakura bowed deeply. Thank you, Tsunade-sama. As she left the office, hand resting unconsciously over her abdomen, Sakura didn't notice how many paths were quietly converging, how choices made with hope were already brushing against shadows from the past. And somewhere in the village, fate waited patiently, as it always did, for the moment to collect what was owed. The day arrived quietly, too quietly perhaps, for something that would bend so many lives without warning. Morning light filtered through curtains in 2 different homes, and in both routine ruled. Sakura moved with focused efficiency, every step calculated, heart beating faster the closer the clock crept toward 9. Hinata, by contrast, moved calmly, methodical in the way she always was, treating the hospital visit as just another responsibility to check off her list. 2 women, 2 appointments, 2 very different hopes. Hinata paused in front of the mirror before leaving, smoothing her hair and studying her reflection. She looked healthy, strong, a woman who trained regularly, ate well, loved deeply. There's nothing to worry about, she told herself. The thought followed her all the way to the hospital. She arrived early, 20 minutes, just as she always did. Hinata changed into the provided gown, folded her clothes neatly, and sat on the edge of the exam bed with her hands folded in her lap. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and something metallic. The clock ticked softly. 9 a.m. came and went. No Shizun. Hinata waited. At 9:20, she lay back against the pillow, eyes drifting to the ceiling panels. At 9:40, fatigue crept into her bones despite a full night's sleep. They must be busy, she reasoned. The lights hummed, a steady, soothing sound. Her eyelids grew heavy before she realized she was fighting them. Just for a moment, sleep claimed her gently. Elsewhere in the hospital, Tsunade was anything but calm. She woke with sunlight stabbing directly through her skull and regret settling like lead in her chest. The anniversary had come again, dragging memories she never truly escaped. Dan's smile, his voice, the future that never arrived. Sake had dulled the ache temporarily. Now it punished her for the audacity. She groaned, rubbing her temples, vision swimming as she forced herself upright. Her reflection in the mirror looked older than she felt. Eyes shadowed, jaw tight with the effort of keeping herself together. "I can handle this," she muttered, though her body strongly disagreed. Tea helped. Barely. Paperwork waited. Patience waited. Responsibilities waited. And somewhere between the headache and the heartache, something vital slipped her mind. She didn't remember Sakura's procedure. Down the hall, an unattended exam room remained silent. Hinata slept, unaware that her wait was no longer routine, that delays, forgotten schedules, and human frailty were aligning in a way none of them could foresee. Outside, the hospital bustled as usual. Inside, fate adjusted its grip, patient, merciless, and already in motion. Late morning light spilled through the hospital windows as Tsunade finally reached the main corridor. One hand pressed to her temple. Her head throbbed in dull, relentless pulses. Every step felt heavier than it should have. She checked the clock on the wall, scowled, and exhaled sharply. Late, again. Before she could reach her office, a nurse hurried toward her, anxiety written plainly across her face. "Lady Tsunade, Shizun called in sick this morning. We're short-staffed. Could you cover her appointments?" Tsunade grimaced but nodded. "Give me the files." The nurse thrust 2 folders into her hands, speaking quickly. "Pap smear in room 11. IUI in room 16. Tsunade barely acknowledged her as she turned away, irritation simmering beneath the surface. Of all days, she adjusted her grip on the folders and headed toward the lab freezer. There was only one prepared sample. She took it, collected the necessary instruments, and paused in the hallway, forcing herself to recall the order. IUI first, then the exam. Room 11. She turned left. Hinata stirred abruptly as the door opened. Her eyes struggled to focus as she pushed herself upright, heart skipping when she recognized the figure entering the room. "Lady Tsunade?" Hinata said softly, confusion coloring her voice. "I thought Shizun was out sick." Tsunade cut in, already pulling on gloves. Her tone was sharp, edged with fatigue. "I'm covering her appointments today." Hinata hesitated, but nodded politely. Tsunade was the Hokage. Questioning her felt inappropriate, especially when she looked so unwell. "All right," Tsunade said briskly, glancing at the file without really reading it. "This won't take long. Just lie back." Hinata obeyed, hands folding tightly at her sides. Tsunade moved on instinct, years of experience guiding her hands while her mind remained clouded. She worked quickly, efficiently, focused only on finishing the task so she could move on to the next patient. "Hold still," she said when Hinata shifted. Hinata stiffened, then forced herself to relax, trusting the process even as unease curled in her stomach. Moments later, Tsunade finished, disposing of the instruments with practiced ease. "All done," she said, already pulling off her gloves. "You'll hear back in a few weeks." Before Hinata could respond, Tsunade was gone, door closing softly behind her. Hinata sat there for several seconds, blinking. Something felt off. She couldn't place it. The procedure hadn't been what she expected, but she'd never had one performed by Tsunade before. Perhaps that was all. Still, a quiet chill crept up her spine. Down the hall, Tsunade entered the next room without a second thought, and in doing so, sealed a mistake that would not reveal itself for weeks, until consequences began to surface, slow and irreversible. By then, it would already be far too late to undo what had been done. Tsunade didn't slow as she entered the next room. She grabbed fresh instruments, her movements automatic, professional muscle memory carrying her forward while her mind lagged behind, dulled by exhaustion and old grief. The door to room 16 slid open with a soft click. Sakura lay waiting on the exam bed, fingers interlaced over her abdomen, nerves and excitement tangling in her chest. "Good morning, Shursho," Sakura greeted gently. "Morning," Tsunade muttered, waving a dismissive hand as she pulled on gloves. Sakura began to sit up instinctively, concern flickering across her face. Tsunade stopped her with a sharp glance. "Lie back. We're starting." Sakura obeyed immediately. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. "Just tired," Tsunade replied, voice clipped. "Spread your legs." Sakura nodded, breath steadying as she followed instructions. Despite the tension, a smile tugged at her lips. This was it, the step she'd waited months to take. "I'm ready," she said, voice bright. The procedure began. When the pinch came, Sakura gasped despite herself, fingers curling into the sheets. "Ow! That's normal," Tsunade said absently, already focused on collecting the sample. "Try not to tense." Sakura nodded, breathing through the discomfort, telling herself it would all be worth it. Moments later, it was over. Tsunade discarded the used materials, stripped off her gloves, and turned away. "Come back in 2 weeks for the results." "That's it?" Sakura asked, stunned by how quickly it had ended. "That's it." Sakura sat up slowly, heart racing. Not from pain, but from hope. "Thank you, Tsunade-sama," she said earnestly. "Really?" Tsunade didn't look back as she left the room, already bracing herself for the long hours ahead. Hinata walked home beneath the afternoon sun, her steps light, expression calm. The appointment hadn't gone how she expected, but she trusted Tsunade. She trusted the hospital. She trusted the systems that had kept Konoha standing through war and ruin. There was no reason not to. She passed familiar streets, greeted neighbors, returned to the quiet comfort of her home, unaware that something irreversible had already taken root. Unwanted, unasked for, unseen. Days would pass before anyone noticed. Weeks before questions arose. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would shatter more than trust. It would fracture families, shake loyalties, and force every person involved to confront a single, unforgiving reality. Some mistakes are not born of malice. Some are born of exhaustion, grief, and a single moment of human failure. And their consequences do not care how unintended they were. For Uzumaki Hinata, heiress of the Hyuga, wife of the Hokage, the nightmare had already begun. She just didn't know it yet. Hinata Hyuga had always been careful. Even as a child, long before war and titles and responsibilities reshaped her world, she learned to think several steps ahead, not to dominate a situation, but to avoid it. She planned routes that kept her out of arguments. She rehearsed words she might never say. She learned how to disappear politely. It wasn't weakness. It was survival. Unfortunately for Hinata, there was one person who saw through every careful step she took. Neji Hyuga. He knew her silences. He knew her hesitations. And in their early years, he used that knowledge like a blade. The Chunin exams forced everything into the open. When Hinata stepped into the arena opposite Neji, the weight of her clan pressed down on her shoulders heavier than any strike ever could. The crowd blurred into noise. The stone beneath her feet felt cold and unforgiving. Neji didn't hesitate. Every exchange ended the same way. Hinata driven back, breath knocked from her lungs, vision swimming as she struggled to stay upright. Her body screamed at her to stop, to yield, to retreat the way she always had. She fell. She rose. She fell again. Blood stained the ground beneath her, warmth dripping down her chin as her hands shook violently against the stone. Her vision narrowed, but something stubborn burned behind her eyes. Something that refused to go out. I won't stop. She forced herself upright, legs trembling, breath coming in ragged pulls. Every instinct told her to stay down. She ignored it. Her voice cracked as she spoke, barely carrying across the arena, but she said it anyway. Not for the crowd, not for Neji, but for herself. She would not retreat. She would not erase herself. That resolve didn't win her the fight. Niji's final strike sent her collapsing once more, body refusing to answer her will any longer. As darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, she heard him standing over her, cool, distant, certain. This was inevitable, he said. You were never meant to win. The words cut deeper than the blow. That day shaped her, not with bitterness but with clarity. Hinata learned exactly how much it hurt to be dismissed, to be told that effort meant nothing, and she carried that knowledge quietly into every part of her life afterward. What surprised even Neji was what came next. She didn't hold on to anger. She chose forgiveness. Slowly, painfully, she rebuilt what had been broken between them. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she refused to let it define her future. Neji changed. So did she. And over time, resentment gave way to understanding, and understanding to something resembling peace. Hinata learned that courage didn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looked like standing back up. Sometimes it looked like letting go. And sometimes, most dangerously of all, it looked like trusting again. A habit that, years later, would place her directly in the path of a mistake she never planned for and never saw coming. Present-day Konoha, the day after her routine hospital visit unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Hinata stood beneath the shade of a maple near the training fields, the mission scroll resting lightly in her hands. The parchment crackled softly as she read through it once more, brow knitting in quiet focus. Reserve duty, escort detail, long-distance travel. It had been a long time since she'd accepted a mission that would take her beyond the village walls. Motherhood had reshaped her priorities, not weakened her, but anchored her. Still, she had kept her skills sharp, trained in the early hours when the village slept, just in case she was ever needed again. just in case, had arrived. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, rolled the scroll closed, and headed toward the Hokage Tower. The office door slid open, and Hinata barely had time to react before strong arms wrapped around her. She laughed softly, words lost against fabric. "And Naruto-kun, shouldn't we be at least a little professional?" Naruto grinned against her hair, tightening his hold. "Relax. No one's." The door burst open. Ino Yamanaka reporting. "Oh." Ino stopped short, eyes flicking between them before she smirked. "Am I interrupting something?" Naruto released Hinata immediately, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was expecting Sakura." The mission assignment was for Sakura and Hinata. Ino crossed her arms. "Yeah, well, plans changed." She tilted her head. "Did you not read Tsunade's note?" Naruto blinked. "Note?" Ino sighed dramatically. "Sakura's excused from active duty for at least a month. I'm filling in." Naruto's expression sharpened. "Is she okay?" "She didn't say otherwise," Ino replied. "Just said she's temporarily grounded. Make of that what you will." Hinata's fingers curled slightly at her side. "A month?" Concern stirred quietly in her chest. Naruto cleared his throat and finally located the correct scroll. "Right. Mission details." He straightened, slipping into his Hokage role with practiced ease. "You'll be escorting a senior elder from Sunagakure back to the Sand Village. He's ill, which is why I initially requested Sakura. Ino, your medical expertise will suffice." Ino nodded, already mentally preparing. Naruto turned to Hinata. "Your Byakugan will be crucial. Long-range detection. Early warnings." Hinata inclined her head. "Understood. You leave tonight," Naruto continued. 3 hours. They bowed and turned to leave. "Hinata, wait." Naruto reached out, fingers closing gently around her wrist. Ino glanced back, caught the unspoken request, and waved them off before exiting. The room quieted. Naruto stepped closer, hands resting on Hinata's shoulders. His thumbs brushed slow, reassuring circles against her back. An unconscious habit born of years spent worrying over people he loved. "Please be careful," he murmured, voice low. "I know it's a simple mission, but still." Hinata lifted her hand to his cheek, grounding him. "I'll be fine," she said softly. "I promise." He searched her face for a moment, then smiled, small, trusting. "I know." As Hinata left the tower, the wind stirred the village banners overhead. She didn't notice the way Naruto lingered at the doorway longer than usual. Didn't feel the subtle unease settling deep in her chest. And she couldn't have known that this mission, accepted without hesitation, would carry her farther from certainty than any battlefield ever had. Hinata returned home with steady steps, already shifting into mission mode. The house felt quieter than usual as she pulled her travel pack from the closet and laid it open on the bed. Clothes were folded neatly, rations measured out, weapons checked, wrapped, and placed with careful precision. Each item had a purpose, each choice made to avoid unnecessary weight. Responsibility, she had learned, was also something you carried. The door slid open abruptly. "Hey, Mom." Hinata turned to find Boruto standing there, hands tucked behind his back, irritation written plainly across his face. "Yes, sweetheart?" she asked, pausing her packing. "I heard you're leaving on a mission," he said. "Does that mean I'm stuck watching Himawari?" She hid a smile as he scuffed his foot against the floor, eyes pointed deliberately away. Hinata stepped closer and cupped his cheek, thumb brushing gently over the familiar whisker marks. "It won't be long," she said softly. "And if you need anything, you can go to your father." Boruto's mouth twisted. "He's never around," he muttered. Then quieter, sharper. Village always comes first. Hinata's hand fell away. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Boruto, she said, voice firm but warm. He froze, then turned back quickly, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. It's fine, really. I'll handle things. Promise. He flashed a thumbs up and bolted from the room before she could say anything else. Hinata stood there for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the doorway. They're both trying, she thought, just in different ways. She closed her pack. The walk to the village gates was unhurried. Ino walked beside her, stretching her arms overhead as if this were any other day. For weeks tops, she said. Easy job. Hinata nodded, though her chest felt oddly tight. They nearly collided with Sakura just beyond the main street. Hinata, Sakura said, surprised. Ino. Hinata's eyes softened immediately. Sakura-chan, how are you feeling? Ino circled her with exaggerated scrutiny. Yeah, forehead. Off duty for a whole month? That's suspicious. Sakura swatted at her half-heartedly. Nothing's wrong, Ino pig. Then she turned to Hinata, smiling gently. Really? I'm fine. She glanced at their packs. You're leaving. 3, maybe 4 weeks, Hinata replied, adjusting the straps with a faint wince. Sakura stepped forward without hesitation. Here, let me. She tightened the straps, redistributing the weight with practiced ease, then patted Hinata's shoulders. There, better. Hinata bowed gratefully. Thank you. I was struggling. Don't mention it. Sakura smiled, though something unreadable flickered behind her eyes. Be careful. Both of you. Ino grinned. We've got this. Right, Hinata? Hinata nodded, returning the smile. Sakura watched them for a moment longer before stepping back, waving as they turned toward the gates. Strong women, she thought. And yet, as Hinata crossed the threshold of Konoha, a quiet unease followed her, unseen, unacknowledged. She adjusted the weight on her shoulders and walked on, unaware that what she carried with her was more than supplies, more than duty. Some burdens, after all, travel silently. For the most part, the mission went smoothly. Guarding the Sand Elder proved more tedious than dangerous. Long days on the road, quiet nights rotating watch, and only the occasional skirmish with desperate Nuke-Nin foolish enough to test 2 seasoned kunoichi. Hinata's Byakugan kept them several steps ahead, and Ino's instincts ensured no fight lasted longer than it had to, until the 3rd week. The attack came at dawn, mist clinging to the treetops as chakra signatures flickered through the forest canopy. Hinata moved on reflex, leaping branch to branch as she engaged a cloud shinobi whose movements were sharp and aggressive. And then, her footing faltered. The world tilted violently. The forest blurred into streaks of green and gray, her Byakugan flickering as if someone had dimmed the lights inside her skull. What? Weakness flooded her limbs without warning. Her chest felt tight, heavy. She barely managed to block the incoming strike, the impact rattling through her arms and knocking her backward. The branch gave way beneath her feet. Hinata! Ino shouted. The cloud shinobi fell moments later. Throat opened cleanly as Ino finished her opponent and spun just in time to dive after Hinata. She caught her mid-fall, crashing through undergrowth before rolling to a stop. Hinata lay limp against her, breathing shallow. Ino didn't hesitate. 3 shuriken flashed from her hand at the sound behind them. A muffled grunt followed, then silence. Only then did she look back down at Hinata. Her eyes were half-lidded. The veins around her eyes faded as her Byakugan deactivated on its own. Oh no, 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 Ino muttered, already pulling a water flask from her pack. She tilted Hinata's head gently. Drink. Slowly. Hinata swallowed with effort, blinking blearily. I'm okay, she whispered, forcing a small smile that didn't convince either of them. I don't know what happened. Ino helped her sit up, eyes sharp with concern. We're 4 days from Konoha. If this happens again, I'm calling for backup. That won't be necessary, Hinata insisted, pushing herself to her feet despite the slight sway in her step. I feel better now. She straightened, shoulders squared, posture disciplined, convincing at a glance. Ino wasn't fooled. The unease only grew. That night at an inn, Hinata barely touched her food. One bite was enough to make her stomach churn violently. She covered her mouth, eyes widening as nausea surged. Ino was at her side instantly, rubbing slow circles on her back. Hinata, hey, are you okay? I think I ate something bad, Hinata said quickly, voice strained. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, rocking slightly. Again, Ino frowned. That's the 3rd time this week. Hinata didn't answer. She bolted for the bathroom, barely making it in time. Her hands shook as she gathered her hair back, knuckles whitening against porcelain as she retched. Ino leaned against the doorframe. Hinata, I don't want to scare you, but... She hesitated. Do you think you might be pregnant? Hinata froze. No, she said too quickly, face burning. Naruto-kun and we haven't. Her words dissolved into embarrassed murmurs. Ino arched a brow despite the situation. You're sure you're telling me everything, Lady Hinata? Hinata's cheeks flamed brighter, but another wave of sickness stole her reply. She gagged again, body betraying her despite her certainty. Ino sighed softly, concern overriding teasing. All right, we're almost home. One more day. From inside the bathroom came another quiet heave, followed by silence. Hinata rested her forehead against the cool tile, heart pounding. Something was wrong, and for the first time since leaving Konoha, no amount of planning could explain it away. By the time the gates of Konoha came into view, Hinata could barely keep her eyes open. Her weight leaned heavily into Ino, each step a battle against dizziness and nausea. Her skin was pale, unnaturally so, and sweat clung to her temples despite the cool breeze. Ino cursed under her breath and tightened her grip. Just a little more. We're almost there. That's when she spotted them. Kiba! Shino! Ino shouted, waving frantically. Both shinobi turned, immediately alert. The moment they saw Hinata slumped against Ino, they sprinted over. What happened to her? Kiba demanded, sliding under Hinata's other arm. Ino sucked in a breath, exhausted. Mission escort. She's been sick for days. Weak, nauseous, almost fainted during a fight. I don't know if it's food poisoning, chakra exhaustion, or something worse. Shino adjusted his glasses, his insects already stirring uneasily beneath his coat. She needs medical attention immediately. Kiba nodded sharply. Hospital. Now. Together, they rushed her through the gates. 3 weeks earlier, Tsunade's headache had faded, but something else gnawed at her now. Paperwork. She sat at her desk, scanning through the previous day's medical records. Routine. Sign-offs. Approvals. Then she reached Sakura's file. IUI completed, she muttered, flipping pages. Her brow furrowed. The documentation didn't match. Instead of insemination records, she found notes for a pelvic exam, pap smear results, cervical cell samples. Her blood ran cold. What the hell? She flipped faster. No IUI documentation, no catheter notes, no insemination log. Her jaw clenched. I know I did it, she muttered. I remember. She stood abruptly and stormed out of her office. Shizune, Shizun nearly choked on her lunch in the break room. Tsunade-sama? You're helping me audit yesterday's patients. Tsunade snapped, slamming Sakura's file onto the table. I mixed something up. Shizun's expression tightened. How bad? Just look. They split the files. Minutes stretched into silence. Then, oh? Shizun froze, staring at one chart. Her heart dropped into her stomach. Hinata Hyuga. Procedure listed. Intrauterine insemination. Her hands trembled. No. That can't be right, Shizun whispered. This has to be a labeling error. She gathered the files and hurried down the hall. Tsunade was still rifling through documents when Shizun found her. Tsunade-sama, Shizun said carefully, holding out the chart. Hinata's file says she received the IUI. The world stopped. Tsunade snatched the papers, eyes scanning, then widening. Memory crashed back in fragments. The freezer. One sample. Room numbers. Hinata's face. Sasuke's sample in her hand. Oh no! Tsunade breathed. Her hands began to shake violently. No. No, 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 no. Tsunade-sama? Shizun asked, panic creeping into her voice. What's wrong? Tsunade looked up slowly. Her face had gone pale. I didn't mix up the paperwork, she said hoarsely. Shizun's breath caught. I mixed up the patients. The silence that followed was absolute. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, Uzumaki Hinata, wife of the Hokage, mother of two, trusted kunoichi, was being carried home. Her body already reacting to a mistake that should never have happened. A mistake that could no longer be undone. Tsunade pressed her back against the cold stone wall, eyes shut tight as she rubbed at her temples. The pressure in her skull felt unbearable now. No longer just a hangover, but the crushing weight of realization. She didn't answer Shizun at first, because saying it out loud would make it real. Tsunade. Shizun tried again, her voice unsteady. Tsunade swallowed hard. Her pride, her authority, her decades of experience meant nothing in this moment. Only the truth did. She drew in a slow breath. I may have accidentally inseminated Hinata, she said hoarsely. With Sasuke's sample, the silence that followed was deafening. Shizun stared at her, unblinking. Then her jaw dropped. What? She shouted, panic ripping through her composure. You're saying Hinata Hyuga received an IUI instead of a pelvic exam? Am I hearing this correctly? Tsunade clenched her fists. Yes, I know exactly what I'm saying. Her voice cracked with frustration and self-loathing. And I know what that means. Shizun staggered back a step, horror washing over her face. How could this even? I was hungover. Tsunade cut in sharply, then quieter, almost broken. It was Dan's death anniversary. I shouldn't have come in like that. I know better. Shizun fell silent. The explanation didn't excuse the outcome, but it explained how something impossible had happened. Tsunade-sama, Shizun said at last, voice trembling. You have to find her. Now. Tsunade nodded once, resolve hardening over the guilt. I know. She turned and strode down the hall, ignoring Shizun calling after her, every step echoing with urgency. The Hokage's office doors burst open. Naruto. Naruto looked up from his desk, startled. Huh? Bachan. Tsunade crossed the room in 3 long strides. Where is Hinata? Naruto frowned, concern instantly surfacing. Why? Did something happen? Tsunade's eyebrow twitched violently. I need to speak with her. About her medical results. Naruto stiffened. Results? His voice dropped. What do you mean results? Sakura-chan's already off duty, and now Hinata too. Tsunade's patience snapped. Naruto, just tell me where she is. Naruto stood abruptly. She's not in the village. She left on an escort mission with Ino 3 weeks ago. Tsunade's breath caught. 3 weeks? She repeated slowly. Naruto nodded. They should be returning today or tomorrow. The color drained from Tsunade's face. 3 weeks. Far too long. If Hinata was showing symptoms already, Tsunade turned sharply, heading for the door again. Get the medical team ready, she snapped over her shoulder. And Naruto. She paused, just long enough to meet his eyes. You need to prepare yourself. Naruto stared after her, unease coiling tightly in his chest. For the first time since becoming Hokage, he had the sinking feeling that no amount of authority, strength, or willpower would be enough to protect what mattered most. And whatever Tsunade had just realized, it was already too late to stop. Naruto flinched at Tsunade's sudden intensity and raised his hands instinctively. She's on a mission, he said quickly. I sent her out with Ino. Tsunade's jaw tightened. When is she supposed to return? Naruto hesitated, then answered honestly. 3 weeks, maybe a little less. For a brief moment, Tsunade said nothing. Then she closed her eyes. What rank? She asked, voice low. Naruto frowned. B rank. Why? Tsunade didn't answer. She turned on her heel and walked out of the office, ignoring Naruto calling after her. The hallway swallowed her hurried steps as her thoughts spiraled into places she didn't want to face. 3 weeks. Too long to intervene. Too long to undo anything. A cruel, shameful thought crossed her mind. One she hated herself for even considering. Maybe the stress of the mission would be enough. Maybe nothing would take hold. There was still a chance, small but real, that no conception had occurred at all. She clung to that hope like a lifeline, and so Tsunade waited. The present offered no such mercy. Hinata's body had finally given up pretending everything was fine. Her vision swam, limbs heavy and uncooperative as Kiba carried her through the hospital doors. Arms steady but expression tight with worry. She barely registered the change in scenery as they laid her onto a bed, white sheets stark against her pallor. Ino paced just outside the room, arms folded tightly across her chest. Kiba leaned against the wall, jaw clenched. Shino stood quietly nearby, eyes half-lidded behind his glasses. They watched as Shizen hurried down the corridor, her usual calm replaced with something sharper, fear. Ino noticed immediately. Did you see her face? She whispered. That didn't look normal. Kiba exhaled slowly. Hinata's tough. She'll be okay. Shino adjusted his glasses. Concern does not always equal catastrophe. But this situation is unusual. The door to Hinata's room remained closed. Inside, machines hummed softly. Medical tools were prepared. Quiet voices murmured. Outside, 3 shinobi waited. Uneasy, helpless, unaware that what was unfolding behind that door was no ordinary illness. Not exhaustion, not poison, not chance. Something far more irreversible was finally demanding to be acknowledged. And when the truth emerged, it would not spare anyone. No matter how strong they were, or how much they wished they could go back. Shizen stepped into the exam room with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hi, Hinata. How are you feeling? Hinata managed a faint smile in return. I've been better. Shizen pulled up a chair beside the bed, clipboard resting on her knee. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Hinata took a slow breath. I've been nauseous for days. Dizzy. I fainted twice. Once during a fight on the road, and once near the gates when we got back. At first I thought it was bad food or exhaustion, but she shook her head slightly. Something feels wrong. Shizen's chest tightened. Those symptoms fit too well. Far too well. She forced herself to remain calm and reassuring, placing a gentle hand on Hinata's arm. We'll check everything thoroughly, okay? Blood work, urine analysis. Let's rule things out one step at a time. She handed Hinata a small cup. Fill it to this line and I'll be right outside. Hinata nodded and complied. Minutes later, Shizen moved efficiently through the motions, drawing blood, labeling samples, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. When she left the room, she didn't allow herself to look back. She found Tsunade in her office, buried in paperwork. "Tsunade-sama," Shizen said quickly. "Hinata's here." Tsunade's head snapped up. "What happened?" "Fainting spells. Persistent nausea," Shizen replied, voice careful. "I'm running labs now to rule out poisoning or illness and pregnancy." Tsunade's hand tightened on the edge of her desk. "Run everything. Immediately," she said, voice low and sharp. "And tell me the moment you know." "Yes, Tsunade-sama." The laboratory felt unbearably quiet. Shizen paced, eyes darting repeatedly to the clock as seconds stretched into eternities. When a nurse approached with Hinata's urine sample, Shizen's stomach dropped. "Do you want a pregnancy test run?" the nurse asked. Shizen hesitated just for a heartbeat. "Yes," she said. She slipped on gloves, hands trembling despite her efforts to steady them. "Please," she thought, "please let this be something else." She dipped the test strip into the sample, pulled it out, waited. Color bloomed. Pink. Shizen stared at it, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. She flicked the strip once, absurdly hoping it might change. Didn't. A nurse wandered in, glanced over and joked, "That result's not going anywhere." "Out!" Shizen snapped, composure finally cracking. She disposed of the strip and stood there for a long moment, eyes closed, forcing herself to breathe. Then she turned and walked toward Hinata's room, steps heavy, heart pounding, knowing that the next words spoken would shatter lives. Because the truth was no longer avoidable, and no one involved was ready for what came next. Shizen sat across from Hinata, hands folded tightly in her lap. She had delivered battlefield casualties, death notices, diagnoses that changed lives forever. This felt worse. "Hinata," she said gently, forcing steadiness into her voice. "The fainting spells and nausea, we know what's causing them. You're pregnant." The words hung in the air. Hinata's head snapped up so fast it made her dizzy. What?" Her breath hitched. "Shizen-san, that's not funny. Please." She swallowed hard as nausea surged again. "I really need to know what's wrong with me." Shizen's chest tightened. "We tested your urine. Twice. That can't be right." Hinata shook her head, disbelief bordering on panic. "It can't. False negatives happen," Shizen said carefully, "but false positives are extremely rare." She hesitated, then asked the question she dreaded. "Have you been intimate with Naruto within the past month?" Hinata's face flushed crimson. She shook her head immediately. "And no, not recently. That's why this doesn't make sense. I can't be pregnant." Silence stretched. Shizen exhaled slowly. "Then we need to involve Naruto." "No," Hinata's voice sharpened, fear bleeding through. "I want another test. I think you're wrong." Shizen nodded quickly. "Of course, we'll do another." "Please," Shizen thought. "Let it be a mistake." 45 minutes later, Hinata sat stiffly on the bed, hands clenched in her gown. Shizen performed the test in front of her this time. No leaving the room, no uncertainty. The strip dipped into the sample. Seconds passed. Color bloomed unmistakably. Pink. Shizen closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. "Pink means positive." Hinata stared at the strip as if it were something alive. "And no," she whispered, "that's not possible. I haven't—" Her voice cracked. "I haven't been with Naruto in over a month." She covered her face, shoulders trembling. "It has to be something else. Hormones. Stress. Something. Pregnancy is hormonal," Shizun said softly, immediately regretting the words. Hinata looked up, eyes wide and shining with panic. "I want to speak to Lady Tsunade. Now." Her voice rose, sharp with desperation. "I can't be pregnant." Shizun stepped back, heart pounding. I'm going to get her, and I'll call Naruto so he can be here for you." She turned and left the room quickly, barely keeping herself together. The hallway felt too narrow. As Shizun approached Tsunade's office, she stopped dead. Sakura stood near the doorway, tense, alert. Beside her was Sasuke. Both of them looked up at once. Shizun's stomach dropped. "No, not like this." She opened her mouth to speak, then froze, realizing with sickening clarity that there was no version of this moment that didn't end in devastation. Behind her, Hinata sat alone in the exam room, staring at a pink line that rewrote everything she knew about her life. Ahead of her stood 3 people whose worlds were about to collide. And somewhere above them all, fate watched quietly, having already made its move. A sharp knock echoed against Tsunade's office door. She rubbed her temples, the headache never truly leaving her, and growled, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Sakura and Sasuke. Sakura stood stiffly, fingers twisting the hem of her shirt again and again, eyes full of hope she was trying and failing to restrain. Sasuke remained silent beside her, posture rigid, face carefully blank, though his knee bounced with barely contained tension. Tsunade gestured for them to sit. For a moment, she said nothing. She studied Sakura's anxious expression, then flicked her gaze to Sasuke. The contrast made her chest ache. Sakura trusted her. Sasuke endured her. She tapped her thumbs against her een seal, buying herself a few more seconds she didn't have. "Tsunade-sama," Sakura asked quietly, voice tight. "Is it too early to confirm the pregnancy? Should I come back in another 2 weeks?" The words cut deeper than any accusation. Tsunade exhaled slowly. "Sakura." Her voice wavered despite her effort. "What I'm about to say, I need you to listen carefully." Sakura straightened. "I used Sasuke's specimen," Tsunade said, forcing the words out. "On the wrong patient." The silence was absolute. Then, Sakura's voice cracked, disbelief splintering into panic. Sasuke's head snapped up. "You did what?" His voice was low, dangerous, stripped of restraint. Tsunade met his stare, jaw tight. "I inseminated a woman with your sample. By mistake." The air in the room felt too thin to breathe. Before either of them could react further, the office door slammed open. "Tsunade-sama," Shizun burst in, pale and shaking. "It's urgent." Her eyes flicked to Sakura and Sasuke, then away again, dread written plainly across her face. Tsunade didn't hesitate. She stood abruptly. "Excuse me." She brushed past them, already moving, escaping one disaster only to step into another. Sakura and Sasuke exchanged a single look. They followed. The exam room door slid open. Tsunade froze. Hinata sat on the bed, hands clenched in the fabric of her gown, eyes glassy with fear. Beside her stood Naruto. Very real, no clone in sight. His posture tense, blue eyes sharp with worry. Tsunade swallowed. "Hinata, Naruto," she said carefully. "Why are you both here?" Naruto frowned. "Shizun called me. She said something was wrong." Hinata spoke before Tsunade could deflect again. "Lady Tsunade," Shizun told me my tests came back positive. She said I'm pregnant. Her voice trembled. But that's impossible. I haven't been unfaithful. I haven't been with anyone else. I swear it. Naruto turned to her instantly, hands gripping her shoulders. Hinata, I know. I trust you. Her eyes filled with tears at his certainty. Tsunade pulled a stool closer and sat, clasping her hands together so tightly her knuckles whitened. She rocked slightly, grounding herself, then looked up. There is a reason, she said quietly. Naruto and Hinata stared at her, waiting. Tsunade drew a breath she didn't deserve to steady herself. The pregnancy test is positive, she said, because 2 weeks ago, I accidentally inseminated you. The room went dead silent. What? Naruto whispered. Tsunade met his eyes. I used the wrong patient, the wrong room, the wrong procedure. Naruto's composure shattered. You what? He roared, chakra flaring so violently the walls rattled. Hinata recoiled, hands flying to her mouth, the world tilting beneath her feet. No, she whispered. No, that can't be. Behind Tsunade, footsteps echoed. Sakura and Sasuke stood frozen in the doorway. The truth, raw, ugly, irreversible, hung in the air between all of them. And in that moment, every bond they shared, trust, love, loyalty, fractured under the weight of a single human mistake that could never be taken back. Shut up, Naruto. Tsunade snapped back, her composure finally cracking under the pressure. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. Her voice trembled despite her authority. There was only a small chance it would even work, and she clenched her jaw. I hoped you'd never have to know. She turned her gaze to Hinata, the anger draining from her expression and leaving only remorse behind. But things didn't go that way. Hinata stared at her. The room seemed to tilt, then slow, then freeze altogether. Sound dulled, faces blurred at the edges. Her mouth opened, but no words came, only shallow, uneven breaths. She looked down at the floor, forcing herself to inhale, exhale, repeat. Her heart hammered so loudly she thought it might burst. I'm so sorry, Hinata, Tsunade said quietly. You're sorry, Naruto barked, raking his fingers through his hair. How could this even happen? Tsunade rounded on him again. Naruto calmed down, but he couldn't. Not when his wife stood trembling in front of him, pregnant with a child that wasn't his, through no fault of her own. Tsunade reached into her pocket and withdrew a small bottle, setting it on the counter with deliberate care. This is an option, she said, voice measured. Hinata, you are under no obligation to do anything. This decision is yours. You don't have to consult anyone. She took Hinata's shaking hands gently, thumbs brushing soothing circles into her skin. If you choose to end this early, you can. Cleanly. Naruto stared at the bottle as if it were poison. How can you be so casual about this? He growled. The father, Hinata whispered suddenly. Everyone froze. Her voice was small, distant, as if it didn't quite belong to her anymore. Who is the father? The door slammed open. Sakura stood there, breathless, eyes blazing. Sasuke loomed beside her, silent and immovable. I know this violates protocol, Sakura snapped, but I want answers. Now. Hinata didn't even look at them. Her gaze remained fixed on Tsunade. Tsunade-sama, she said softly. Please. The room held its breath. Tsunade closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was no escape left. It's Sasuke, she said. Sakura's hands flew to her mouth as a strangled sound escaped her throat. Naruto's eyes widened in shock, the world crashing in around him all at once. Hinata blinked. Then her knees buckled. Naruto caught her instinctively, arms wrapping around her as she sagged against him. "Hinata," he whispered urgently. She turned her head weakly, eyes finding Sasuke's. His gaze was cold, distant, unforgiving. There was no confusion there, only calculation, separation. In that instant, she understood with devastating clarity. To him, she was no longer a person. She was a problem. Her chest tightened. She looked away. Darkness took her. As Hinata slipped into unconsciousness in her husband's arms, her mind grasped at a single, burning thought. Raw, furious, uncharacteristic. For the first time in her life, Hinata Hyuga did not forgive. On the day she learned she carried a child born of another's mistake, she held her first grudge. In the fragile calm that followed the Fourth Great Ninja War, the village gates stood open, not as a symbol of defense, but of departure. Sasuke waited just beyond them. Kakashi lingered nearby, hands tucked into his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that belied how closely he watched the last Uchiha. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not unfamiliar. Kakashi cleared his throat. "So," he said casually, "where will you go now?" Sasuke's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "Not sure." Kakashi sighed inwardly. "Of course. And what do you plan to do?" He tried again. Sasuke didn't look back. "See the world." Short, final, unyielding. It had always been like this. Sasuke didn't elaborate, didn't explain. Kakashi had learned, painfully, that pressing him only pushed him further away. Some people carried their answers inward, where no one else was allowed to touch them. Far from the gates, the Hyuga compound basked in rare tranquility. Birdsong filled the air, and for once, no tension weighed down the ancient walls. Hinata sat with Hanabi beneath the open sky, the aftermath of war finally giving them space to breathe. Hanabi's grin was unmistakably mischievous. "So," she said lightly, leaning closer. "What now, sister? The war's over, the world's not ending, and Naruto is still very single." She winked. Hinata nearly combusted. "H. Hanabi!" she exclaimed, face flushing deep crimson as her hands flew to her cheeks. "You can't just say things like that." Hanabi laughed openly, delighted. "I'm just curious." Hinata looked away, forcing herself to calm down before answering. "I want to train," she said honestly. "I want to be stronger. For myself, for the clan. I want to help you however I can." Hanabi blinked, surprised, then smiled, softer this time. "You really thought this through." Hinata nodded. "I had to." Without warning, Hanabi wrapped her arms around her sister. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. Hinata returned the hug, heart warm and steady. Back at the gates, Kakashi finally placed a hand on Sasuke's shoulder. "Just don't make things harder than they already are," he said quietly. "It took more effort than you know to convince the elders to let you walk free." Sasuke paused. "Thanks," he said. "I appreciate it." At that exact moment, across the village, Hinata spoke the same words to her sister. Voice gentle, expression bright. "Thank you. I really appreciate it. Two people, two paths, one village at peace." They did not see each other then. They did not know how deeply their futures would one day collide. But even now, years before fate twisted their lives together, both Hinata Hyuga and Sasuke Uchiha were already walking forward, unaware of the consequences waiting patiently for them at the end of their chosen roads. Present-day Konoha. Hinata woke to pale morning light spilling across her bedroom walls. For a heartbeat, she didn't remember why her chest felt so tight. Then it came rushing back. The hospital, the words, the looks. "I'm pregnant." She gasped softly and pushed herself upright, hands trembling as they pressed into the mattress. The room felt too quiet, too normal, as if nothing catastrophic had happened at all. She stared at the wall, unseeing, then slowly lowered herself back onto the bed. Her palm drifted to her abdomen. There was nothing to feel yet, no movement, no sign, but the knowledge burned all the same. Tears welled, blurring her vision as the weight of it settled fully into her bones. Hopeless, terrified, lost, not just pregnant, but pregnant with Sasuke Uchiha's child. She turned to grab tissues from the bedside table and knocked something to the floor instead. A small bottle rolled against her foot. Hinata bent down, picked it up, and wiped her eyes as she read the label. Misoprostol. Her name was printed neatly beneath it. Her fingers tightened around the bottle as her thoughts spiraled. This was an option, an escape, a way to make everything stop before it became real, before it destroyed her family. And yet, she remembered Sasuke's stare. Cold, cutting, distant, as if she had committed some unforgivable crime. She didn't know what he thought, didn't know what he would do, didn't even know what she wanted. Not yet. She set the bottle down with care and stood, forcing herself to breathe. One thing at a time. She dressed mechanically and moved into the bathroom, splashing cool water on her face. As she reached for the towel, she noticed a folded note taped to the mirror. Her hands shook as she opened it. Hinata, I hope you're feeling better. When I come back home, we'll talk about the pregnancy. Please don't stress yourself out. Okay? Naruto. Her throat tightened. She folded the note and set it beside the sink, heart aching with gratitude and fear all at once. Naruto trusted her. He always had. I can't break that, she thought desperately. She brushed her teeth, glanced at the clock, and frowned. 7:30 a.m. Late. She sighed. It was understandable, she supposed. Anyone would be shaken after news like that. Hinata squared her shoulders and stepped into the hallway. Motherhood didn't pause for grief. She woke Himawari gently, coaxed Boruto out of bed, and headed into the kitchen to make breakfast. The familiar routine grounded her. Cracked eggs, heating pan, steady breathing. Then the nausea hit. Hard. Oh no, she whispered. Morning, Mom. Boruto called cheerfully from behind her. Hinata bolted. She barely made it to the bathroom before retching violently, the door slamming shut behind her. Her stomach cramped, sweat beading along her hairline as she clutched the sink between heaves. Mom! Boruto's voice came through the door, sharp with worry. Are you okay? I'm fine, she tried to say, only to gag again. She waited, breathing shallowly, until the nausea receded. With shaky hands, she rinsed her mouth and washed up, staring at her reflection. He saw, she realized. He knows something's wrong. She opened the door to find Boruto standing there, brows furrowed, eyes searching her face. Mom! Hinata forced a smile and ruffled his hair. I'm okay. I think I ate something bad. Boruto didn't smile back. Dad carried you home last night. You were unconscious. Her heart skipped. She turned away, gathering herself. I just came back from a mission, Boruto. I was exhausted. He studied her for a moment longer. Dad looked really worried. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. I'm fine. She softened immediately, guilt flickering across her face. Breakfast will be ready soon. Okay? Boruto nodded slowly, unconvinced. Hinata stepped away and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Dark circles beneath her eyes, skin pale. I look as bad as I feel. A sharp scent reached her nose. Smoke. Her eyes widened. The eggs! She rushed back into the kitchen to find them charred beyond saving. Hinata sighed, turned off the stove, and started again. As the pan heated, she leaned against the counter, one hand resting unconsciously over her stomach. What am I going to do? Outside, the village carried on as if nothing had changed. Inside Hinata Hyuga's chest, a quiet storm gathered, one that would not be soothed by routine, denial, or time. Sasuke woke already angry. It sat in his chest like a live wire, humming, waiting for something to snap. He stared at the ceiling, jaw tight, thoughts spiraling back to the same place no matter how hard he tried to shove them away. Tsunade's face, Naruto's voice, Hinata collapsing, Sakura's scream. A mistake. That was the word everyone kept using. He hated it. He hated Tsunade for being careless enough to shatter multiple lives in a single morning. He hated Naruto irrationally, unfairly, for marrying someone so gentle, someone who trusted the world enough to let it betray her like this. And beneath all of it, coiled deep and ugly, was his anger at himself. He had agreed to this. He had let Sakura convince him that an IUI was logical, efficient, safe. Now Hinata, of all people, was pregnant, with his child. The mattress shifted beside him. Sakura stirred, yawning softly as she rolled onto her side, pink hair a mess, eyes still heavy with sleep. When she looked at him, the hostility in his gaze hit her like a slap. She blinked. Once, twice. Really? She muttered, rolling onto her back and pulling the blanket up. She stared at the ceiling, hands coming up to cover her face. As if this isn't already bad enough. Sasuke said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Sasuke, Sakura tried. I don't want to talk about it. She turned her head slightly. We can't just pretend this isn't happening. I don't want to talk about it. Each word was bitten off, sharp and final. Something in Sakura's chest cracked, but she didn't let it show. She sat up, threw the covers aside, and went to the bathroom without another word. The sound of running water followed. Sasuke lay there, fists clenched at his sides, staring at nothing. When Sakura emerged dressed for work, she paused at the doorway. For a brief moment, she looked at him, really looked. Hurt flickered across her face, then resolve. He didn't look back. The door closed softly behind her. Only then did he exhale, a harsh sound torn from his chest. Once again, he was going to be a father. The thought clawed at him. His mind dragged him back to the hospital. Hinata's body going limp, Naruto's arms tightening around her, Sakura's hand gripping his shoulder. He had taken a step forward, not out of concern, not out of compassion, out of instinct. Aboard it, his mind had screamed, end it, fix it. He wasn't supposed to become a father like this. Not through negligence, not through another man's wife, not through a mistake soaked in blood and guilt and silence. Sasuke-kun? Sakura's voice had trembled behind him. He'd brushed her off. Naruto had risen then, Hinata cradled carefully against his chest. The look he gave Sasuke had been sharp, not hostile, but protective in a way Sasuke recognized all too well. Whatever you're about to say, Naruto had warned, now is not the time. Sasuke had stepped forward anyway. Naruto had turned away. Not now, Sasuke. And then they were gone. The memory burned. Sasuke sat up abruptly and swung his legs off the bed. Sitting still was unbearable. Thinking was worse. He dressed quickly, movements sharp, controlled. His thoughts turned briefly to Tsunade. He scoffed. A drunk, a liability, a woman who had failed at the one thing she was supposed to be infallible at. He wouldn't trust her with answers. Naruto was out of the question. Sakura, not now. Not while the wound was still open. Hinata. The thought stopped him cold. He didn't know her. Not really. Polite smiles. Quiet strength. Eyes that always seemed to look past him rather than at him. And now she carried something that belonged to him. Something that tied them together whether he wanted it or not. His teeth clenched. No, he needed space, control, silence. He grabbed his sword and headed out, the familiar pull of the old Uchiha grounds guiding his steps. Training would burn the edge off his anger. Motion would drown the noise in his head. Anything was better than sitting still with the truth. As Sasuke disappeared into the morning, the village moved on around him. Unaware that beneath its calm surface old fractures were widening, and something irrevocable had already begun to take shape. Sasuke descended the stairs, senses catching on the smell of freshly made breakfast before his thoughts could snag on anything else. On the counter sat a neatly packed lunch sack. He opened it and found 3 onigiri wrapped carefully in cloth. Okaka, his preference. He stared at them longer than necessary. She'd made them for him, to calm him down. He scoffed quietly, closing the sack, though some of the tension in his shoulders eased despite himself. "Good morning, Papa." He looked down. Sarada stood there, eyes bright, smiling at him with the same uncomplicated warmth she always carried. The sight twisted something sharp in his chest. Sarada. He hadn't thought about her yet, not properly, about how this would affect her, about how she might one day ask questions that had no clean answers. An older sibling. The thought surfaced unbidden. No, that wasn't going to happen. He wouldn't allow it. Not like this. Not born from negligence and chaos. "Papa?" she asked again, confusion creeping into her voice. "HN." He reached out and tapped her forehead lightly with 2 fingers, the familiar gesture automatic. "Behave." He moved past her, cape shifting with his stride. "Ow!" Sarada rubbed her forehead and scowled. "That hurt." Sasuke glanced back once, unreadable, then turned his attention to the lunch sack instead. Sakura watched the exchange from the kitchen doorway. Concern shadowed her eyes. Yesterday's events sat heavy in her chest, an ever-present ache she couldn't soothe no matter how she turned it over in her mind. She wanted to talk, needed to, but every possible sentence dissolved before it reached her lips. This wasn't about her. It was Sasuke and Hinata, their decision, their burden. Still, she couldn't stop the question that gnawed at her. Does he want the baby? "I'll be back," Sasuke said abruptly, slinging the sack over his shoulder. She didn't stop him, didn't even watch him leave. Across the village, Hinata paced the length of her living room for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Silence pressed in around her, broken only by the ticking of the clock. She stopped, checked the time again, then turned sharply and went back into the bathroom. The pregnancy test lay in the trash. She pulled it out, fingers trembling. Pink, unmistakable. Her shoulders slumped as the last fragile hope drained from her chest. This wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Naruto's note, the hospital, the test in her hand. All real. She dropped it back into the bin and leaned against the sink, eyes closed, breathing slowly until the sting behind them eased. "I need answers." She glanced toward the bedroom, to the small bottle resting quietly on the nightstand. The choice Tsunade had offered. The choice that terrified her more than the pregnancy itself. Her thoughts drifted unwillingly to Sasuke. The way he'd looked at her. Cold, distant, as if she were something he needed to erase. He was the father, and whether she liked it or not, that meant something. She straightened, resolve settling into place. Not peace, but purpose. First Tsunade. She grabbed her keys, slipped on her sandals, and stepped out into the morning light, locking the door behind her. As Hinata walked toward Konoha Hospital, she had no way of knowing that at the very same moment, Sasuke was heading in the opposite direction, both of them moving toward decisions that would shape far more than their own lives. The village remained calm, but beneath that calm, everything was already shifting. Sasuke stood there longer than he meant to. The hospital loomed behind Hinata, sterile and unforgiving, a monument to the mistake that had detonated all their lives. The wind tugged at her hair, pale strands lifting and falling like she might be pulled away if she didn't anchor herself. She didn't look strong right now. That irritated him because she was strong. He had seen it in battle reports, in quiet moments during the war, in the way she stood behind Naruto without ever hiding. And yet here she was, small, tense, clutching something white in her hand like a lifeline. The strip. His jaw tightened. She startled when he coughed, like a skittish animal. The way she jumped sent a flicker of something uncomfortable through him. Guilt, perhaps, though he refused to name it. "Uchiha-san," she stammered, eyes dropping immediately. Of course they did. HN. He hadn't meant for it to sound so sharp. Came out that way anyway. She shrank. Not physically, but emotionally. And that bothered him more than her words ever could have. She looked like she wanted to fold into herself, to disappear into the stone beneath her feet. "We need to talk about," he gestured vaguely, then more precisely toward her stomach. "This." The word landed like a blade. Her hand tightened around the strip. Her other arm crossed over her abdomen instinctively, protective, defensive. He caught the movement and hated that he did. She inhaled carefully, as if each breath required permission. "Why, yes," she said softly. I was just about to go inside." She didn't ask why he wanted to talk. She already knew. Sasuke studied her in silence. She wasn't showing yet. Logic told him that. Medically, she couldn't be. And yet the way she stood, shoulders subtly curved forward, palm hovering near her stomach as if something fragile might shatter inside her, made the situation feel more real than any test result ever could. She was already changing. That realization stirred something dark and unsettled in his chest. Her face was flushed, eyes refusing to meet his. He watched the way her fingers traced unconscious circles against her abdomen, small, repetitive motions meant to calm herself. He saw the tremor in her lips when she swallowed. She was terrified, and she was still trying to be polite. Sasuke exhaled through his nose. "This shouldn't have happened," he said finally. Her shoulders flinched. "I know," she replied quietly. Not defensive, not accusatory, just accepting. That wasn't the response he expected. He frowned. "You don't look surprised." Her fingers stilled. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Not fully, just enough to meet his chin, his mouth, never his eyes. "I don't think surprise lasts very long when you wake up knowing everything has already gone wrong." The words were gentle. They cut anyway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. People passed by the hospital entrance. Nurses, civilians, shinobi, but no one paid them any mind. To the village, this was just another morning. To Sasuke, it felt like standing at the edge of a blade. "I didn't come here to argue," he said, "and I didn't come to accuse you." Her eyes flickered up then, startled. "Good," she said softly, "because I couldn't bear that." He looked away first. "I came," he continued, voice low, controlled, "because we need to decide what happens next, before this turns into something we can't control." Her lips parted. She hesitated, then nodded once. "I was going to speak to Lady Tsunade about my options." Options. The word echoed unpleasantly in his mind. "Good," he said again, though his tone was harder now. "Then we're aligned." She stiffened at that, not in defiance, but in uncertainty. "Uchiha-san," she said carefully, "before anything is decided, I need you to understand something. He looked back at her, finally meeting her eyes. They were not weak. They were frightened, yes, but beneath that fear was steel. Resolve. The same quiet strength that had once driven her to stand against Niji, against fate, against herself. I did not choose this, she continued, but it is happening to me. Whatever decision is made, it cannot be made for me. Silence stretched between them. Sasuke studied her, really studied her, and for the first time since yesterday his anger faltered. Not vanished, but shifted. I know, he said after a moment. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't permission. But it was the first honest thing he'd said since everything fell apart. The hospital doors slid open behind them, releasing a rush of cold, sterile air. Hinata took a small step forward. If you wish to talk, she said, voice steadier now, then we should do it properly, inside, where there are answers. She didn't wait to see if he followed. Sasuke watched her walk ahead, head high, back straight, hands still hovering protectively over her stomach, and realized with a jolt of unwanted clarity that this was no longer a problem he could solve with force, logic, or control. Whatever was growing between them now was already beyond that. And for the first time since the hospital, Sasuke Uchiha felt something dangerously close to uncertainty. Oh. Hinata's quiet response pulled Sasuke out of his spiraling thoughts. She clasped her hands together nervously. Well, maybe we could talk when Sakura-san and Naruto-kun are. Sasuke exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across his face. Naruto and Sakura have no ties to this, he said flatly. Their opinions don't matter right now. Hinata flinched. But. He turned away from her mid-sentence and started walking toward the old Uchiha grounds. After a few steps, he stopped. Hinata hadn't moved. Sasuke glanced over his shoulder, eyes sharp. Follow me. Hinata swallowed hard. Running away wouldn't change anything. She was already bound to this situation, bound to him by the fragile life inside her. So she followed. The old training grounds were nothing like the ruins she had imagined. Cherry blossoms bloomed freely around the lake, petals drifting lazily through the air. Birds sang from unseen branches, and a narrow stream murmured somewhere beyond the trees. It was peaceful, almost cruelly so, considering the weight of the conversation about to take place. Sasuke stopped near the water's edge and turned. He crossed the distance between them in long strides until he stood just a foot away. Hinata's breath caught. Her eyes stayed fixed on his sandals at first, fingers twisting nervously in the sleeves of her dress. Slowly, she forced herself to look up. He was close, too close. She took in his face without meaning to. There were no scars, no harsh lines carved by years of battle. His skin was pale, unmarked, almost untouched by time. But his eyes were different, darker than night. Nothing like Naruto's warm blue gaze. They unsettled her. Sasuke studied her in return. For the first time, truly. She wasn't the timid girl who used to linger at the edges of the academy. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her short dark hair framed her face delicately, accentuating porcelain skin and pale eyes framed by long lashes. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that demanded respect rather than attention. She had changed, and that realization irritated him more than it should have. No wonder Naruto chose her, he thought grimly. He shoved the thought away. This ends here, he said, voice devoid of emotion. Get rid of it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Hinata's eyes widened, breath catching painfully in her chest. She had expected this, had rehearsed it in her mind, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. Far worse. What? She whispered. Sasuke didn't hesitate. End the pregnancy. His tone was calm, clinical, as if he were discussing a mission parameter, not a living thing growing inside her. A sharp sting burned behind Hinata's eyes. "How can you say that so easily?" she asked, voice trembling despite her effort to remain composed. "You don't understand," he replied coldly. "This child should not exist. It was born from a mistake, a dangerous one." Her hands instinctively moved to her abdomen. "That mistake is inside me," she said, barely above a whisper. "And you don't get to erase it like it's nothing." Sasuke's jaw tightened. "I won't allow this to destroy my family. Or yours." Hinata shook her head, tears finally slipping free. "You don't get to decide that alone." The wind stirred, scattering cherry blossom petals between them like falling snow. For the first time, Sasuke faltered, not outwardly but inside. Because she wasn't breaking. She wasn't begging. She was standing her ground. And that terrified him far more than her tears ever could. Hinata shifted her weight, toes curling slightly against the earth as she gathered what little courage she had left. I know that neither of us wanted this," she said softly, voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. And I understand how difficult this must be for you to cope with." She paused, closing her eyes briefly. But I need time. Time to think." Sasuke blinked. Then his expression darkened. "Time?" he repeated flatly. "Why do you need time?" Hinata lifted her head, pale eyes steady now despite the fear twisting in her chest. Because it's my baby too, Sasuke." The words surprised even her. There was strength there, quiet but unyielding. "I need to be sure," she continued, voice firmer. "Sure of my decision." Sasuke scoffed, irritation flaring openly now. "I have a say in this. You do know that, right?" Hinata stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. For a moment, she looked like she might shrink back. But she didn't. "I have the final say," she replied, voice low but resolute. "You, Uchiha-san." Her gaze hardened. "I will contact you when I'm ready to talk more." And with that, she turned away. She didn't see the look he gave her. Sharp, dangerous, simmering with a loss of control he despised in himself. She only felt the weight of his presence lift as she disappeared from view. Hinata's hands were still shaking when she stepped inside her home. The silence pressed in on her, heavier than before. She hadn't expected to see Sasuke so soon, hadn't expected his words to cut so deeply, so cleanly. "Get rid of it." The phrase echoed in her mind, over and over, like a blade striking bone. As the sky darkened, Boruto and Himawari returned home, voices bright, full of life. Hinata smiled when she needed to, nodded when spoken to, moved through the motions of motherhood like muscle memory. No one noticed how tightly she gripped the counter when the nausea surged again. No one saw how her eyes lingered on nothing at all. Later that evening, the front door opened. Hinata looked up from the dining table where she sat with a glass of water, fingers wrapped around it as if it anchored her to the world. Naruto stepped inside, exhaustion etched into his posture. He smiled when he saw her, waved lightly, hung his cloak on the rack. He crossed the room and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead before taking her hand. She let him lead her to the bedroom. The door closed softly behind them. The moment they were alone, Hinata broke. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against him, clinging as if letting go might send her spiraling apart. Naruto didn't speak. He only held her, rubbing slow circles against her back, letting her breathe him in. When he finally eased them down onto the bed, he kept his hands close, steady, patient. "So," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "How are you doing?" Hinata rested her head against his shoulder. Terrified, angry, heartbroken. I'm okay, I guess, she murmured. Naruto was quiet for a beat. Then gently, but firmly, he said, "You're lying." The words weren't an accusation. They were a promise that whatever came next, she wouldn't have to face it alone. Hinata's eyes flicked up to Naruto's face, then quickly away again. Naruto didn't push. He only shifted closer and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, grounding her against him. "How do you really feel?" he asked quietly. That did it. Hinata's lip trembled as she struggled to keep herself together. "I'm not happy," she admitted at last, voice small but honest. "I feel frustrated, scared, sad." Her hands folded together in her lap, fingers twisting over one another as if she could wring the fear out of them. Naruto listened without interrupting. He lay back and gently pulled her down with him so they were side by side, the bed creaking softly beneath their combined weight. "I don't blame you," he said after a moment. His voice was gentle, tired. "Have you thought about what you want to do with it?" Hinata squeezed her eyes shut and covered her face. She didn't tell him about Sasuke's words. She couldn't. Naruto would explode, not at her, but at the cruelty of it. She wasn't ready for that storm yet. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just need more time." She turned to look at him. Naruto's expression tightened despite his efforts to hide it. His jaw clenched, brows knitting together before he forced them smooth again. Hinata saw it all. The hurt, the confusion, the quiet fear that she might choose a path he didn't understand. "I see," he said softly. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. 11:49 p.m. Naruto exhaled slowly, exhaustion finally overtaking him. "It's late," he murmured. "We'll talk more later, when we're not so tired." He stood, turned off the light, and slid back into bed beside her. "Good night, Hinata." His breathing evened out not long after. Hinata lay awake. Her eyes burned, tears slipping silently into her pillow as her body shook with restrained sobs. She turned her back to Naruto and pulled the covers around herself, staring at the faint outline of the nightstand. The pill bottle sat there, unmoving, waiting. She closed her eyes and prayed. Prayed that tomorrow would bring clarity, or strength, or anything that would make this easier to bear. Eventually, sleep claimed her. Life went on. Sasuke moved through his days with practiced detachment, letting time carry him forward the way it always had. Yet this situation gnawed at him in a way few things ever had. For the first time, he wished he had planned more carefully. Wished he hadn't trusted that everything would be handled cleanly, quietly, without consequence. Hinata, on the other hand, had always planned. Every step of her life had been deliberate, cautious, thoughtful. And until now, it had worked. This was the one thing she had never prepared for. The pregnancy felt like a cruel interruption, a jagged tear in the life she had so carefully built. Some days, the weight of it made her want to disappear entirely. There was an old saying she couldn't stop thinking about: if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Neither of them had planned for this child. And somewhere above them, perhaps the heavens were laughing, while two lives quietly unraveled beneath the sound.
That's all for now. If you enjoy them, please like, share, and do comment.